Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be creating a landscape using watercolors. This is a simple painting of the seashore and I'll describe this as a windy seashore. So let's get started. The materials that I'm using for this is the Camel Artist watercolor cakes, the Camel watercolor tubes and the Faber-Castell watercolor pencils. All of these different materials are going to be used to add different textures to our painting. I'm using a few brushes like this and also 2 jars of water. Remember that you always have 2 jars of water because it's very important that your brush is clean before you dip your brush into a next color. Because if you still have some of the previous color on your brush, it's going to mix up with the new shade and it's going to become a very muddy color. And for that not to happen, you should always remember that you have an extremely clean brush. And lastly, we're going to be using some watercolor paper. This is the watercolor paper that I'm using. You can get this easily. And if you don't have this watercolor paper, you can use cardboard, but make sure you use cardboard that is thick and not the ones that's like this. It's very thin and it's not going to be able to back in a lot of water, but this is extremely thick and it can back up a lot of water. This one, it has a warm shade and this is a cold pressed watercolor paper and it has a slight texture so that our watercolor painting turns out more interesting. We're going to start with the basic sketch first. It's going to consist of a boat and the sun which is setting, some water and some distinct trees. So let's get started with this watercolor painting.
We are going to start drawing the piece of land, then we're going to do the boat. It's going to get a 3D effect. We're going to draw the cloth that is up above the boat and we're going to join it up with that stick. We're going to tie the cloth to the joint so that it looks tied up. Then we draw some distant trees and then the sun that is actually setting. We're going to draw some birds and a few distinct birds, and that is the horizon.
This is our basic sketch all completed and we're gonna add in the colors now. We're gonna start with these watercolor cakes. And also we're gonna make this water a bit more textured so that we can add a different effect to our painting. So we're gonna have also some lines and we're gonna make it look more interesting. So I'm gonna start adding the patterns and filling this in.
We're going to start adding these sorts of lines to indicate the waves. We're going to fill it in with different shades of blue so that we can give the painting a more interesting effect. We're going to add white here, dark blue and some light blue. We're going to add some splashes and waves. So just know that you can always erase up the extra graphite if you feel like it's going to show through the painting. If it does, then you can always remove the top layer of graphite. But make sure you do have that basic sketch in. Alright, so here I'm going to start with some water first and we're going to add in the brown, drop in the brown. We're going to add some different shades here and there, like dark brown, light brown to give it a shade. And then we're going to start with this rod. And it may look a bit unruly and not so straight, but if you look from far away, it's actually going to look very interesting. but it's gonna look perfect when we fine tune it. So as you can see, I'm adding light green, dark green, and just giving it a more interesting effect. We're gonna add in that shade of the dark green. So, and we're gonna add in the land with the light green. We're gonna do the distant trees next. Now we're gonna add in the color for the cloth. I'm using blue, but the sky is not going to be blue, so that's the only reason I'm using blue. The sky is going to be yellow. We're going to add a shade of yellow for the sky, and it's going to look like a good contrast. And now I'm going to use the watercolor tube set for the bird because it's going to be more opaque. I'm going to start in with the purple, or in the color it's called mauve. And remember, you should never use watercolor tubes as acrylic colors. You should always dilute it with water. You can add some interesting shades. You can actually use any color for this, but I decided to use blue and purple because it is going to be a nice contrast with the yellow in the background for the sun. We're next going to use water with just adding a plain layer of blue. Then we're going to do the interesting shades. So the way these watercolor pencils work is basically you color it in like a regular pencil and you add water to it and it turns into paint. So to get more opacity, you paint on a wet surface, but if you want it to be regular, you paint on a dry surface. So now I'm just going to color the whole thing in with blue and we're going to add different shades. I'm starting to add in the yellow to show that the sun reflecting on the water. Now we're gonna do the sun, which is basically gonna be a shade of orange, yellow and red. Watercolors blend in very beautifully. It's very easy to blend watercolors. That's why I like using watercolors a lot. And I'm adding basically yellow for the sky. And as you can see, the bird contrasts very well with the yellow. I am using the watercolor pencil on a wet surface. As I told you, when you use it on a wet surface, it'll be more opaque.
This is our watercolor painting, almost complete. We are going to let this dry up and then we are going to fine tune this. This is how our watercolor painting looks once it's dried up. So the opacity of the paint has actually reduced a bit because we have let it dry. We're going to fine line it with a sketch pen and this pen. Now use a scale wherever necessary and do not actually add any other effects. You're just going to fine line it. And if you do want to add effects, use a color pencils or your watercolor pencils. Now let's start fine lining. Did forget that there was actually a piece of land here, so just gonna sketch that in and we're gonna fill this in with some colors. We're gonna use the watercolor pencils, but we're not gonna add the water into it actually, and we're just gonna shade it in and fill it in with some brown. watercolor painting all complete. It's very simple and do try this. I'll link all the products that I used in the description box below, and these products are easily available on Amazon.com. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye guys.